You're not a woman, you're a disease!
And what are you? A drunk, a weakling, a kept man, can't hold a job, living off your wife. You're a worthless, crawling, miserable excuse for a man. You cowardly hero. You're no hero. You're a drunk, a drunk, a drunk.
ご機嫌いかがですか？渡辺Danです。On today's episode of Crazy Cinema, we're going to be starting a new series. It's called When Divas Fail, and these are those movies that should have, by all intents and purposes, been cult classics, but instead have entered that field of ignominy of just being bad movies that ultimately didn't have even the fun of being a good bad film. And today is one of the greatest examples of that. It is Where Love Has Gone, made in 1964 and starring Bette Davis, Susan Hayward, Mike Connors, Joey Heatherton, and Jane Greer. I mean, just that list of names is enough to make you say, okay, there's no freaking way this isn't going to be a blast. Add to it that it's based on a Harold Robbins novel that was based on the Lana Turner, Johnny Stompamato case, where Cheryl Crane allegedly, accidentally, on purpose, killed Lana Turner's lover, the gangster. And then it turned out that the gangster might have been having his way with her, and it led to an entire huge scandal that resulted in two of Lana's biggest box office hits ever, Peyton Place and Imitation of Life, which used elements of that real life story. I mean, come on. There was no one like Lana who could take her private life and make it into public commerce. And it was written by John Michael Hayes, who wrote the Alfred Hitchcock thriller Rear Window. And in addition to that, wrote other things such as the 1960s adaptation of The Children's Hour, Butterfield 8, To Catch a Thief, and Peyton Place. I mean, come on. This is a very good resume of someone who knows how to balance the craziness of melodrama with the height of knowing how to capitalize on the apperceptive mass. Don't you love that term? Yeah, I've spent thousands of dollars to learn it at USC, so you might as well get it for free. It means what a movie star means just by being present on the screen. So you would think that with all of these materials going in, it couldn't go wrong. Yet it goes wrong in one of the worst ways ever. And that is, it is boring. And the reason it's boring is, well, there's many reasons. Number one is that the book itself made the mistake of changing the heroine, obviously for legal reasons, from being someone who was a movie star into being a sculptress. Yeah, okay, that's something that's not necessarily that interesting. And instead of the good husband being the rather boring Stephen Crane, he became an architect, which is boring too. Now, you would think that having Mike Connors, who at that time was just over being called Touch Connors, would itself be enough to compensate. After all, not too long after, he would begin his long, successful career on TV playing Mannix, this kind of tough, sexy private eye that had a lot of fun. And Mike Connors in general is one of those stars who, even though he's not necessarily exciting on the surface, when you're watching him, he's never not interesting, with this movie being a rather large exception. Jane Greer, living off of the memories of her wonderful performance in Out of the Past, plays an understanding psychiatrist or social worker who helps try to figure out why this case is so complicated. And of course, then we have our two main divas, or three main divas, let's put it that way. The first of them was relative newcomer Joey Heatherton, who plays the troubled girl. And it is here that our problems really start. Because while Joey Heatherton is able to, at certain moments, capture the burning sexuality that was beneath this teenage girl who, because of her nymphomaniacal mother, is kind of starting to carry on the family tradition of finding an interest in the male characters, and her mother not paying any attention to her doesn't help the situation. There's one great scene Heatherton has, and that is when she is speaking with a psychiatrist who for some reason isn't Jane Greer. And the psychiatrist offers her, because Joey Heatherton wants a cigarette, offers to give her one if she will tell why it is that she seems to have so much resentment. And Joey Heatherton very plainly says, well, I just wish that I had a proper family and a father who could love me. And the psychiatrist, in one of Eddie Dmytryk's great examples of objective correlative, has, instead of her giving Joey Heatherton a cigarette, throws her the entire package, and Joey Heatherton throws it back. So it's one of those moments that should have given an indication of where her performance could have gone, but it never goes anywhere near that. Instead, she comes across as this kind of whiny combination of Shirley Temple and Cindy Brady. So she never really delves into the darker side of it, which is kind of surprising, given that Joey Heatherton would, be an okay sort of replacement for Connie Stevens with Troy Donahue the next year in My Blood Runs Cold, and would later go on to play the happy hooker, where she clearly had a good time playing Xavier Hollander. The second person who's a little bit of a mystery in this is Bette Davis. And the reason she's only the second person is because Bette Davis at this period was kind of balancing her new career as the Gorgon from Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, and was still trying to maintain her position as a legitimate actress. So in this one, she has the frosted white hair, and she's constantly wearing a veil, and she's always in there messing up her daughter's life by being a control freak and by always criticizing her and by always seeming to be very friendly, but having an ulterior motive there. Her family and the family name is much more important than anyone's happiness. And therefore, I mean, Davis is pretty good when she keeps approaching Mike Connors and trying to make sure that she lets him know that he has to be under her thumb or she will destroy his career. She will not let him be a success. She will let him marry her daughter because she feels that he adds kind of a feather in the family's cap because he's a war hero. But perhaps if Eddie Dmytryk, the director, had given in to the temptation of allowing Bette Davis to go totally insane during the final funeral scene, it might have given the movie a much needed kick in the rear end for at least a very fun conclusion. Davis refused to do it, and I don't know why, because she was only a couple of years away from doing the anniversary where she would be wearing an eye patch and really not becoming her career. I mean, that's one of those other bad movies that's not any fun. It should be, but it's not, because it's too deliberately campy. Nothing like something like Joan Crawford's Straight Jacket, which of course is a masterpiece. But I'm going to save the biggest reserve of condemnation for Susan Hayward, because Susan Hayward at this point had gone way beyond her grand dame period and was now being this great tragedian, as befits someone who won an Academy Award for I Want to Live, and who had torn out all the stops when she made I'll Cry Tomorrow or With a Song in My Heart, all these other films where she was just a source of eternal, beyond control diva-dom. And in this one, she does it. She plays this nymphomaniac. She has many scenes where she's berating Mike Connors, and yet she's not enjoying herself. She's not the fun creature she would be just a few years later in Valley of the Dolls, where she and Susan and Patty Duke have this all-out battle with one another. That certainly is a highlight of that movie, but she's in it all the way, all the way through. She plays a Broadway diva who is nasty as can be, but still has moments of real genuineness and also hypocrisy, where she goes, I don't need pills like Neely, as she slugs down a very, very full double. So, you know, we're getting to see her in all of her colors. Unfortunately, in Where Love Is Gone, she doesn't play her various colors. She plays someone who really wants to be happy. She's not really pushing her manipulation well when she's going after a guy. We get the feeling that it's tragic in a scene where she approaches Mike Connors and says and tries to convince him that maybe it's better for her daughter if they get back together, and he sees right through her. And she goes, I hope that it was as difficult for you to say no as it was for me to ask. And he goes, it was harder. And you know, we know that they're both lying to each other. But in the next scene, when they're in the courtroom case, and Mike Connors goes out there and pretty much says, no, it was actually Susan Hayward who killed the guy, and she was trying to convince her daughter to take the fall. And Susan Hayward has her moment to really go after him. She kind of doesn't. Instead, she goes home and commits suicide. Now, before she commits suicide, she does one of the great moments in the film where she comes to a portrait of Bette Davis that Bette Davis has given her so she can always be there where she can be seen. And she takes a chisel and slashes it to bits. That's the Susan Hayward we know and love, not the one who spends most of the movie acting as if she's Jean Tierney. Another person who kind of disappointed me in this is Edward Dmytryk. Edward Dmytryk was just coming off of The Carpetbaggers, which was another Harold Robbins adaptation that admittedly gets off to kind of a weak start, but then it starts really rocking with one crazy scene after another, which includes Carol Baker swinging literally from a chandelier and then falling off and ending up in a hospital before her errant boyfriend, George Peppard, as Jonas Corder Howard Hughes type, decides, oh, why don't I make her a big movie star? But she can't get rid of her alcoholism. And we have George Peppard worrying about the fact that he might be insane like his younger brother, and we have him completely screwing up his marriage with Elizabeth Ashley. You know, so that movie was continually fun, particularly at the end when he and Alan Ladd get into a knockdown, drag-out fight. And Alan Ladd, for whom this was his last movie, actually comports himself pretty well in this part of someone who goes from being a killer Western hero in real life to being kind of the nanny to growing up George Peppard, and then turning that into being an actual Western movie star. So he carries all of this. And so Edward Dmytryk, I would have thought, would have been able to handle Where Love Is Gone. I mean, he was able to take Dick Powell as a tap dancer and turn him into a hard-boiled detective as Philip Marlowe. So one would think that he would have no problem carrying this off. And yet, it's disappointing. This doesn't have the energy it needs. And ultimately, that is why, in spite of a silly title theme, in spite of, you know, a number of really risible moments, Where Love Is Gone is one that I cannot recommend spending time with. It does not deliver enough unintentional humor. It does not deliver enough role modeling moments. It does not deliver any of that panache that really separates the great diva epics from something that's just, and also ran, good TV movie type things, nothing more. And considering the talent behind it all the way up and down the line, that's a great tragedy. But you win some and you lose some. That's why we love the movies, isn't it?